Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is DreamerZ. First, a couple of announcements. Check out our new show. It happened May the 4th. It's on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Also, watch the Forbidden documentary, Occult Louisiana. That is on Tubi. Get yourself a Rokfin premium membership at rokfin.com/FKN Plus and download all our audio podcasts through Spreaker. That's always free for you. Finally, booking guests for September. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome DreamerZ. He has been researching eschatology, fringe theories, symbolism, etymology, paranormal, hidden history, prophecy, and much more for over 27 years. His website, jdreamers.com, is filled with audio and visual examples of his research and theories. Jay, welcome. How you doing?
Hey, what's up? Thanks for having me on. I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. Thanks so much for coming on. I really enjoy your work. Can't wait to get into this. And after nearly 11 years from my own awakening, I now have a relatively satisfying understanding of the nature of our human experience, which could be updated with any new information. But as of now, your work really parallels my understandings very closely, and I'm looking forward to hearing more and comparing some notes. It was only after years of meditation, psychedelic, shadow work, self-healing, and following synchronicities that I came to my current understanding. So I'd really love to hear a little bit more about your journey and what led you down your path.
Okay, right on. People ask me often, like, how did I start on this path? And I almost always talk about how I've been really inquisitive since I was a kid. And just always kind of felt different, looked at the world in a different way, got in trouble with authority in school and structured things of that nature when I was younger, mostly for just being creative and kind of not really rebellious, but challenging the system, asking a lot of questions about things. So that took me later on in life down the religious path where I was really interested in religion. So there was a lot of weird anomalies and strange things that I found specifically within the Bible to start with. And one of the things that really kicked me down this path was researching giants in the Old Testament. Whenever it started to mention gigantism and that there were gigantic humanoid beings and these fallen angels that came down, it piqued my curiosity. And so I started asking around. But every time I asked around, I got these different answers. Some people were internalizing it. Some people were saying it's symbolic. Some people were saying it doesn't exist and all those giants are dead. And then I had more questions and none of my questions were being answered. And finally I hit brick walls when the answers I started to get when people couldn't go any further was, well, that's just God. We're not supposed to understand some things. I'm like, man, well, you might not, that might work for you, but I'm pressing on and I'll do it by myself if I have to. So I just started independently researching and reading a lot of different materials and books. And I really grew from, just that corridor of mainstream Protestant Christianity and broke out from there, studying the Old Testament, getting in depth, really learning the biblical Hebrew so that I could better understand what the original context was and what was really meant originally. And then that took me into Paleo Hebrew and Phoenician and picture forms. And this aligned with my interest in etymology and word origins and the beginnings of things. And then that lined up with the Tower of Babel and the languages being broken apart and people babbling and language evolving. I really don't like to call it that. I think it's just fractured from telepathy. But anyways, that it just really branched me down so many paths. And every time I hit a new path, I've never been satisfied with just planting a flag and staying on whatever new revelation I happened upon at the time. I took it, I learned it, I studied it, researched it, incorporated it into my building blocks of knowledge that I had so far. If something didn't line up, I would just put that on the side to use for later. You know what I mean? And I continued on and I kept asking myself, and this is really what helped me to develop many different theories um, on so many topics and so many subjects, was asking myself, when I did come to a new revelation that was new for me, what are the implications of that? Let's suppose, and I was more of a philosopher, let's suppose this is true. What are the implications? How could that have come about? What's the next domino that it's going to knock over? Other areas of the world and society and the stories across time and history? How does it affect everything or change other things? So I really grew from there, and then started jumping into cosmology later on in life. I was really always interested in the hollow earth. I felt like there was more evidence for that than for any of the other theories I was really interested in. So after studying the hollow earth and going into like the deep recesses and the cavernous openings and inner world civilizations and the climate and the animals and the power sources and whatnot, from fiction to history to fact to speculation, I took it all in. And then whenever I couldn't really find any more, that's whenever the flat Earth movement was really gaining popularity back in about 2016, 17 or something. And then I started researching that and looking into that. And that took me back down a new road into ancient cosmological beliefs and my ancestors and how they viewed the world. And I reread some of the old scriptures like Enoch and whatnot and reconsidered them. And then that I expanded from there into my own ideas and theories based on all of that knowledge into what I call the fractal verse theory. And then whenever I was studying the fractal verse, which is sort of a multiverse holographic version of like, the multiverse theory, I was always into eschatology. And for example, back in my roots, whenever I was on that Christian path, the book of Revelation and the book of Genesis were my two favorite ones. The beginning, the end, the creation, the destruction, the renewal, all of it really spoke to me. And at the time, I was already looking into and I was hooked by the concept of the electric universe theory that's put forth by like the Thunderbolts Project, David Talbot. And there was a really cool website that I stumbled upon that just really gave a lot of fresh information and things to consider. It was called the Saturn Death Cult. I don't know if you heard of that website. Yeah, that one was really eye-opening, man, and it really helped to plug in some stuff. But especially the cosmic plasma aspect of it all, and then trying to combine the electric universe, this cosmic plasma, these thunderbolts of the gods, with the cosmology that was more ancient and widespread the world across and across time, and my own fractalverse theories, as well as all these other fringe theories that seem to all have connections, alien beings coming down, a hollow world underneath our feet, strange and anomalous lights in the sky, weird events throughout history. Man, it just broke open so many avenues of thought, and I'm constantly thinking about like 1,000 different subjects now. So that took me to, I just put a name on my own views of like eschatology. I just call it the plasma apocalypse. So right now I'm really into, and I write books about the plasma apocalypse and what I call ancient oblivion, which is our ancient history that has been forgotten or obliterated, whether purposefully or just through ignorance over time by the people.
Right on. That's a great introduction. Well, I think a great place for us to start would be with some of that hidden history. You mentioned fallen angels and the possibilities of what these beings are, the different interpretations. Let's start there because we look at seemingly where humans began to really explore some of the concepts like mathematics, agriculture, metallurgy, things like that they were supposedly taught by these beings or outside intelligences. What was the interpretation that ultimately you settled on with what these beings are?
Well, I don't really have anything that I've settled on, like I said, because I'm always growing and flowing and moving forward, and you know what I mean. but it's been a walk, you know. When I was much younger, all I was really familiar with was just green, giant-headed, big-eyed little aliens from Mars or something, you know, just traditional aliens as they're depicted in the media. Like Paul. You ever
Yeah,
see Paul?
yeah,
That movie?
right.
That movie's
Yeah.
funny. And then it kind of grew from there to like when I was more religious, it was angels, and then there was classes of angels, and then there was divisions amongst the angels between the fallen ones and the righteous ones, and then the questions arose: why did they fall? I mean, did were they thrown out of heaven, and where is heaven in relation to earth? Because they're transferring from a place where they were to a physical place where they are we talking about dimensions, or is heaven on an actual physical dimension just as we are? So this took me down many different roads. I was kicked in the butt by the Ancient Aliens television show on the History Channel, I think it
Mm,
is. I don't know, but Ancient
yeah.
Aliens, with the guy
The
with the
hair,
hair and
yeah.
all that. I love that. Yeah, I love that they were looking into all these historic records and really putting together archaeology and the things that have been left behind in relics and pictures and carvings and statues and all these little strange anachronisms from the ancient past. So I started to think about what I thought about aliens. And at first, I only stuck with humanoid, just the humanoid aliens. The more I looked into it, the more it seemed like I was drawn to those that fell down from the sky, which means they descended. There's the word Nephilim, which means the fallen ones or those who did fall or caused to fall. And I'm thinking, well, I mean, if they're physical beings and they fell to earth, they just would have died. They'd reach terminal velocity and squish into the earth and die. So it's more than just them falling out of the sky. There's something else there. So I started to pursue how they came down, which is really what it is to come down, how they came down into this world. If they were crafts, what they started to look like how they initially were described. And the descriptions across myths and legends all started to match up and line up, which in general, I'll just give a generalized description, but there's many. But in general, oftentimes these beings and creatures that fall out of the sky or come down from the heavens are white. They're, I mean, like albino looking, pale skinned creatures, not Caucasians, but really white creatures from the heavens, from up there in space and whatnot. And then after I was really, done looking into these white humanoid gigantic creatures, that's another thing too, is that everything that comes down from above oftentimes is described as being very large or tall or gigantic. And then I started to consider the other classes of these quote unquote aliens. So in the alien, research community, there's different types of aliens, just like you would see on Star Trek and Star Wars and stuff. There's animal aliens, there's insectoid aliens, there's humanoids, etc. There's monstrous forms and whatnot.
Hello, friends. At some point in our journeys, we all need guidance and direction. One thing I've learned along the way is that there are many ways to connect with our soul mission. Jennifer Halcame offers over 30 years' experience with intuitive tarot, life coaching, and energy and attachment clearing. She helps others with energetic blocks become aligned with their soul mission. She offers one-on-one or online Zoom sessions, and cases are assessed on an individual basis, and she works with everyone truly in need. You can email her now to set up a free consultation at jenniferhalcame@gmail.com or through Facebook Messenger. All those links are right in the description.
And as I started to study these, I was correlating it with my concept of the fractal verse and there being these other worlds out there or other Earths, and then those that can travel between world to world. And as I was studying the Native American lores and these legends that are spread by word of mouth from generation to generation, when I was looking into eschatology, the beginning and the end of their creation stories and their origin stories and stuff, many times they all would agree that animals dropped down from the sky. That's where they came from, or they came up from a lower world, and that's where all of these animals came from. That the animals are
Hmm.
aliens, or at least some of them, not all of the animals, but they seem to indicate that there are alien animals. And then I started thinking about all the weird looking animals that we have here on Earth that people take for granted, and they say, "Oh, that's just a giraffe," or "Oh, that's just a," like, man, some of these look pretty alien to me, you know. So I looked into the concept of alien animals, alien creatures outside of just the humanoid species, insectoids as well. For example, like in Revelation, it talks about these locust creatures that come up out of the bottomless pit. This would be an inner earth reference to
Hmm.
insectoids, but they're gigantic, just as they're depicted on the movie The Mist, Stephen King's The Mist. There's this huge locust things that like attack this grocery store. But anyway, so that led me into what I call fantazoids. So a fantazoid for me is basically an alien creature, but it's not. It doesn't have to be, and it's not limited to humanoid aliens that are traveling here in saucers from other planets. It's any creature that leaves its natural world, which is below ours or above ours, or to the peripheral outside of ours,
Hmm.
basically. They leave their cosmos, they leave their normal, where usually they're much larger in size. They come into our world, so they transition from their normal to our normal. And during this collision of worlds, or this exchange that happens during the apocalypse, it's uh, whenever it's available to them to actually cross into our world. Because right now I believe there's barriers in place, natural electromagnetic barriers and physical barriers that keep creatures out um, of our closed system, that I, you know, how I see our world. But anyways, when that closed system opens up, there are stargates, there are portals, there are windows and openings above us and below us, where these creatures, according to historic records and myths and religions and everything across time, they come in at a certain time. They mix, and um, there's this alien infestation all at once of all these different types of alien creatures and I'm just using the word alien lightly, but they're alien to this surface world where we live. But in reality, they're from either the mesocosm above, or you could say the microcosm below us, or the world below us, or whatnot. And they come into this world and they mix and they merge, and there's this clashing. It's akin to Ragnarok from Norse
Hmm.
mythology, all of these different beings and creatures. And that's just the physical alien creatures. There's also those entities that were cartoonified as being physical creatures, or titans, or giants. And that gets into terrestrial beams of energy that shoot up out of the earth, and they move about and seem to spread their arms. And people told these stories of them and how they moved about and how they interacted with the world around them, or these serpentine filaments of cosmic plasma that come down. Once that magnetic barrier is removed during like a neutral point of a polarity shift, they're no longer kept out.
Hmm.
So all that cosmic plasma up there comes down to the earth to ground itself. And in ancient times, people saw and described the dragons, the original dragons, which were worms. They had no legs, no arms. Oftentimes, when they were depicted, they had a ball in their mouth. They call that the Dragon Ball, which is like why that cartoon anime is called Dragon Ball. They were worms with a ball in their mouth, because these were self-contained plasmoids that came down into this world that left streaks behind them, or just plasma filaments that are like worm-like and tubular, that streak on down and undulate into this world. They can petrify things. They can change the electrical and chemical bonds of things depending upon the power of those filaments. They can set things on fire, just like the dragons of old.
Now, this leads to our cosmology and the realm that we are in, what this is. You mentioned Hollow Earth a few times, and the possibilities that there is an entire ecosystem below us and above us. What is your understanding of our cosmology and what this is that we're on?
Okay, so I start out locally, right? So I just check out my local area. I go off of my own experiences on the surface where I've been from state to state and country to country across the world. And I take that into consideration. And then I've listened to the different theories that other people have had. And I cross reference that and compare that to theories and worldviews that have been held and taught across time from culture to culture. And I look these up and I look at the drawings that people have made of our local world and what it looks like to them and how it's been described in ancient literature and scriptures and writing and stuff. And so for me, the way that I see my cosmology is what I call the fractal verse. Locally, our world is like well, it's filled with water right now at the moment. Our world goes through changes. So anytime that you see this symbolism of like a labyrinth or a maze where the walls are constantly shifting and you have to get to the center, etc., that's for me symbolic of the world that we live in on the surface, because the mountains move, the valleys change, the cracks widen or they shut, and these are all of the walls of the labyrinth that we live in. And like rats in a maze, we would be truly free to be able to escape or to just accept our surroundings and just call the maze home, I guess. But anyway, locally it's the water's level. So the water is, more of the plain portion of it. However, all those portions of the ocean go way down. So it dips down into like a crater shape essentially. And then within that crater, you have all of these risings of high areas, these mountainous areas that today are the continents. On top of the continents, we have even higher areas of elevation. But I believe there was a time a long time ago whenever the oceans were not here. The oceans were introduced, and it's a cyclical pattern of the oceans arriving and then being removed. And then they arrive and they're removed. So when they're not here, there's much more land to be explored. There's much more to the world. And there's a lot of desert and stuff because, the oceans are gone, but there's all that sand and stuff that's left behind. And then I believe that we have a covering over the world, which is the firmament, the traditional firmament, the dome, the ceiling over the world. And so far, it seems to me that it is dome shaped. It's sort of like an upside down bowl over the world. I believe that that's made out of ice, that it seems to me that nature would provide the elements in order to build such a structure. I also believe it sort of acts as um,
Hello.
have you ever heard
I
of
think
this?
you froze up for a second. What would you say?
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Can
I
you hear me
can.
now? So for me, like there's like a dome structure of ice that goes around our world that keeps pressure
Hmm.
inside. And that's why we have weather and weather patterns and stuff, is all that pressure, atmospheric pressure builds up because there's a physical barrier that's keeping that pressure in. There's also the magnetic force that pushes in diamagnetic gases back towards the earth, and that adds to the pressure inside of our world. So locally, I see our world as being similar to a snow globe, essentially, just very simply put. It's way more complex than that, but it's also very simple. Underneath our world, we have the roots of the world, the pillars and the columns that support the world that go down into the underworld. And I feel that they continue on, that it doesn't just come to an end, because the way we've been taught in modern academics is just this whole suspended in space thing and just floating around and being separate. But this gets more towards my spiritual beliefs of separation, which is one type of belief or religion or spirituality, versus unity and togetherness and connectedness. So I see the fractal verse as all of these little snow globe worlds or realms everywhere having these roots that go to different places, these cavernous tunnels, and they end up back underneath and touching these subterranean passages of other worlds, just like the root systems of plants. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like you could see the flowers on top as being the realms that we live on, and then the root systems underneath, or the mycelial network underneath the mushrooms and stuff, as being the passages between worlds, the subterranean passages. And then outside of us, above the dome and beyond, the quote unquote ice wall, we have the liminal spaces, This would be the heavens. This would be the halls that are between the rooftops of all of these different realms and worlds and whatnot. And out there, it's full of plasma. It's very bright. It's very light colored. It's very colorful and beautiful, and everything's extremely gigantic and close up. If we were to rip apart the veil above us, the physical firmament, I believe that we would see the heavens in all of their real splendor, the way we imagined it would look as children, being colorful and very lit up and bright. And that is the way that heaven is depicted from culture to culture across time. Heaven is not a dark place. It's not a void. And that's why people they turn heaven into like a dimension instead of saying that it's on the same as ours and that it's a physical place that we can go to, just like the Garden of Eden was a physical place, I believe. Heaven also it's up there. Ask people, hey, point to heaven, and they point up. They know it's up. They know it's above us. They know it's space or whatever. I call space just the space that exists between the surface world and the dome or the barrier above us, because that's what space is. But occasionally a hole opens up and pressure needs to be released from our world. And when that hole opens up in the firmament and the atmosphere depressurizes and whatnot, then the light of the heavens is seen, which is, the nearby light is the first light that's really seen because it's closest and brightest. And that would be the ionized hydrogen gases that wrap around the world, known as in academics as the plasmasphere. But anyway, so this gets into like, we have, if we're a flower, like Horton Hears a Who from Dr. Seuss, there's like that elephant that finds a flower and there's like all these beings that live on the flower. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
So we're like little who's that live on the tip of that flower. And out there in the cosmos above us, there are many of those flowers. This is the Elysian Fields. In ancient Rome, it would be called like the Elysian Fields or the heavens. It's like a whole bunch of flowers out there. Now, it's akin, symbolically, a great way to think of this or envision it is our neurons within the brain and synapses within the brain, how they're all connected, or at least electrically connected at the actual synapse where they're so close and there's electric energy that's passed between them. That's the heavens. So whenever you see in fiction and sci-fi and fantasy, which I find a lot of truth in, television shows or movies where a portal opens up and there's this Einstein-Rosen type bridge and there's like this plasma vortex that's spinning and whirling, and people always go through it and they end up on either an alternate Earth, they end up in a different time, but like a similar place, or some other world or whatever. These are plasma conduits that go and connect electromagnetically all of these different flowers in the Elysian Fields, all these different hubs, energetic hubs for experience that we call realms and worlds and planets and stuff.
Now, what is your...
And so these people travel through them to get from world to world.
Right on. Now, let's get to your understanding of how the global resets unfolded, what you're calling the plasma apocalypse, and the purpose that we see these resets, that it's pretty evident they seem to happen multiple times throughout our ancient past.
Yeah, everywhere I look, I see evidence for different types of resets happening. And at first, when I first started really studying eschatology, I thought there was just two, because I came from more of a Christian biblical background, where it basically says there's one that happens, that's the flood. That's the more popular one that people kind of know of and they're aware of. Then people are like, yeah, the world flooded a long time ago. And I'm like, the world is still flooded. You need to look around. It's got an ocean. It's everywhere. Like, it's still here. It's just receded a bit. Okay. But it's still here. But then there's the other one by fire that, isn't talked about as much, probably because that's the next one that I believe is on the way. So at first I was like, there's a reset by water. There's a reset by fire, but those are the big ones. Those are what I call the apocalypse, which is the uncovering of the world, where the firmament or the covering of this world uncovers. It moves. The sky falls. The firmament cracks open. That is the uncovering physically. I know there's a lot of people that internalize it and they're like, oh no, it's just a step, and it's an evolutionary step in our consciousness or whatever. That's fine. I believe that there's truth to all of those different levels of seeing the apocalypse. But I also like to really focus on the physical aspect because I'm a physical being in a physical world, and I want to know the physical portion first. How am I going to actually physically experience these things? So one by water, one by fire. Um, those are the two main apocalypse atmospheric depressurization where the firmament cracks open, and there's a lot of other dominoes that touches. In between those, we have other polarity flips. So the polarity in our world can still flip around without the atmosphere depressurizing or without the firmament breaking open. There's other factors that contribute to those happening, and it takes a lot longer for that to happen. But during these other polarity shifts, we still have these little mini um, cataclysms, which are in between the apocalyptic cycles. So you have little mini cataclysms that happen, which are little reset events that tend to affect a large portion of the world, but they don't have to be worldwide. And a lot of these, they'll have little symptoms of the apocalypse, like major earthquakes and liquefaction and mud floods and civilizations disappearing. A great example for this, one of my favorite ones, is the Dark Ages. And all of the things that are associated with the Dark Ages are indicative of a cataclysm, of a polarity reversal, where the atmosphere was electrically amplified and it changed people's style of dress. It changed their architecture. They were forced to adapt to a new environment that was under an atmosphere that was electrically charged and amplified. And we also see during the Dark Ages all of these discussions and talks, historic records within bestiaries that were written by monks that swore to God to tell the truth. They talked about unicorns and monsters and cryptids and all these weird creatures that existed during the Dark Ages, as well as the tales of giants and gigantism being reintroduced, people fighting the giants.
You also mentioned that there is an expected upcoming possible reset by fire. Talk a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's, if let's suppose that we have a cycle that's water and fire and it goes back and forth between the water and fire. Let's just start there, right? If that's true, the evidence is here now that the last one to have happened was by water, that the oceans are manifest, right? So if that's true and the oceans are worldwide evidence that the last cycle was water and we became a water world, then naturally the next thing to happen is the oceans will be removed and the seas will be gone, and that fire will be the next one. This fire comes in two different forms. Fire in the ancient world, um, it was the word light, really, and then fire became an implication, like a type of light, basically. So light was first, and then over time, the different words for light sometimes took on the form of a specific kind of light, which was fire, hot light that burns stuff, right? So it's an age of light, and it's an age. It's on the grand scheme of things, on the grand timeline, it's daytime for the earth. It is the day. It is the time of revealing, light being cast on things. It's also symbolic of, people's minds being open and truths being understood by many people and whatnot. But it is these cycles that go back and forth between the age of water and the age of fire. The fire comes down in the form of plasma from above. So I talked about that ionized hydrogen that swirls around our world. Whenever the magnetic barrier goes away, that magnetism that wraps around the dome of the world, it pushes plasma away. Plasma is afraid of it. You could say it's repelled by it. So plasma is repelled by a strong magnetic force, and the Earth's dome, as acting as like an electrical superconductor, is the strongest magnetic force that there is. And so it pushes out all of that plasma, keeps it at bay. But once that magnetic barrier hits a neutral point during a polarity shift, there will be no magnetism. There will be no Earth magnetism at all for a short time. That's the window that the cosmic plasma just outside of our world has to streak on down and undulate into this world as fiery serpents and wonderful snakes and all these different descriptions. And it sets things on fire. So many things, especially it'll be a lot drier if the oceans are removed. The oceans will be removed if the atmosphere depressurizes suddenly. We have rapid depressurization where, I don't know, let's just say I don't know how big the hole in the firmament would be. I'm still working on my own little guesstimates and stuff. But let's say you have like a 500-mile wide just hole open up in the dome, and then all of that atmospheric pressure, which is akin to a fluid, okay, it all escapes and it leaves. Archimedes' principle says that however much weight in fluid that is displaced and leaves our world will be equal to a new buoyant force from underneath that lifts objects up. And this is um, when this happens, people would perceive our world as suddenly experiencing zero gravity. For those that believe in gravity and the academic model, they would just see things, people, animals, objects, cars flying, floating around. And there would be a world storm that is also created because these winds would start swirling around as it all gets sucked up into the heavenly stargate or whatnot. And so any slight breeze is going to start to lift and move and direct all these things that are floating. The oceans are also no exception. They're going to be one of the main things that easily just floats up into the air. Any wave that begins, um, what happens is whenever this increased buoyancy kicks off, it doesn't just things don't just get yanked up into the sky. They slowly start to lose their weight. So that everything will start feeling lighter and lighter and lighter to the point where it starts to basically float. So waves out in the ocean, those waves that are building and rising, they'll just keep rising and rising and rising, and they'll just be walls of water that rise up into the heavens. They're going up higher and higher. Much of that water will get sucked out of that depressurization point in the sky, which is akin to like the ancient sky god Kronos eating his children and sucking everything up into his mouth and stuff. All that water will be drinking or drank by Kronos. It'll get sucked up and out, much of it. And it needs to be as well because the oceans will be poisonous at that time. The oceans will be toxic and covered in red tide, and they'll be releasing all these nasty toxins into the atmosphere. So it'll be a good thing that the oceans are removed. The oceans will be reintroduced during the next cycle, but the oceans will be removed. That'll leave all of the stuff on the ground. The plasma comes in, it sets fire to major forests, and it'll be attracted to areas that electricity is naturally attracted to. So areas with high amounts of metal, like major cities and stuff, are a huge target for this type of electricity that comes down from the sky. And you'll have lots of fires the world across. You also have a different type of plasma that's terrestrial plasma, but I don't believe that type is sets things on fire as much as the fire as the electricity that comes down from the sky. That's a more powerful type of plasma. The terrestrial plasma that shoots up out of the inner earth is more of a cold plasma. And there's plasmas that are cold to the touch, or that they might be warm, but they won't burn you or anything. They don't set things on fire. So that's the cycle by fire that I believe we're going into. And the evidence of that is the ocean's existence, that we have one ocean across the world. It's the flood, and it's still here. And even in the Bible, in the book of Revelation, that's one of the last things that it says, is that the oceans are removed, that this prophet was given a vision. He looked at the world and saw that the seas were no more.
Now, you've also talked about the era that we're in now. You call it the era of Satan energy. And what you're speaking of previously is something that we should expect in the future, right?
Yes, because of the cyclical
Talk a little
nature.
bit about what this era of Satan means, Satan energy.
Yeah. Okay. So in order to understand this, I like to call it the season of Satan because it's SOS. So the season of Satan that we live in order to understand the energetic fields that resonate with the surface and cause everything to just become satanic or evil. And these are just labels. I use them lightly, but good versus bad, basically. In order to better understand the time we live in now, I look back to the time where it was paradise, to the times when things were better, to the golden age. And I ask myself what the difference between those times and the modern world are. And I find that the golden age was a time of light. It was a time whenever those beams of terrestrial energy were flooding the world with electrical energy, and we had an atmosphere that was electrically amplified, which had implications that touched other dominoes that led to a better way of living on Earth. First and foremost, in an electrically amplified environment, the human body, the skin responds. It's stimulated by electricity, and it stimulates the elastin and the collagen within the skin. And modern medicine is just now barely even tapping into this or revealing this. But that this is how they try to reverse aging. If you look on the internet, they do it on a really small scale with little tiny electric pins, and they stimulate the skin, which causes the wrinkles to go away because the elastin is increased in that area of the body. So it tightens it up, and it allows the skin to snap back to its original nature. Imagine humans walking around during a time when the entire world was like that, where the atmosphere was electrically charged and it stimulates cellular regeneration. So people lived a lot longer during this time of light, whenever the light ruled the world, and there was terrestrial beams of energy just filling the world with what I believe to be ionized oxygen for the most part. And if you have, I believe that humans are also electromagnetic, or that we have electromagnetic fields, right? We have chakras, auras, spirits, souls that to me carry an electromagnetic frequency. If that's true, and the atmosphere was electromagnetically amplified, then we would resonate with it. It would amplify our own spirit, our own chakras, our own brain patterns and brain waves and whatnot, enabling telepathy and telepathic communication, so that there is no mistake. There are no lies. There is no misinterpreting of what a person did or felt or experienced or said or anything. It's copied and pasted, or it's shared directly. This is also obviously portrayed in many different works of fiction and sci-fi on the movies and everything, but it harkens back to a real time when the world had one voice. It had one method of communication, which was the truth, which was sharing exactly what you felt to another person by letting them feel it, or sharing your exact memories by just simply letting the other person in on your memories and letting them see what you went through or whatever. So these are all good times. These are all, there's exceptions and anomalies, but in general, this is the golden age. This is a time of truth. This is a time of light, and there is no hiding. There is no darkness. People live longer. People are much healthier. But that's when those beams of energy are filling the world, when the light is shooting up from the earth itself and reaching up to the heavens and looking like it's supporting the firmament itself and whatnot. But then when we go through another polarity flip, all of that energy that we benefit from, that allows the plants to grow, that allows people to live long and to have rapid healing and other things that happen too. When it flips around, that energy retracts. Those lights die. They're seen and they're cartoonified, and they're told in stories as having been murdered or having done something wrong or having vanished or been kidnapped or whatever. And they go down into the underworld as the earth charges, because it needs to go back and forth as an electrolytic cell or a galvanic cell. It flips back and forth between like two different types of batteries. One battery that charges, so it charges all of its own energy, and this is how it sustains itself. It charges its energy, and then it releases its energy. The time of release is the golden age, where it shares that energy with us, when it shares that life with us. That's good times. That's seen as the time when there is a savior, a good king, a good world ruler, the time of Jesus, Charlemagne, Alexander. I mean, it all depends on your perspective, but these are just types. What was the other one? King Arthur, you know what I mean? Like all these different legendary type figures or religious figures or whatever, saviors of the world, gods, goddesses, that bring agriculture and bring an abundance of life and stuff. When those beams of energy retract and go down into the earth, and the earth charges that energy, it siphons all the energy in different vortices around the world. They collect together, and there's only few places where that energy pools up, that there's a remnants of that old energy, that good positive earth energy. And most of that good energy goes back into the heart of the earth as the earth heals and it stores all that energy. So right now in the underworld, they're benefiting a lot from all of that right now. They're living during an opposite time. They have their golden age in the world below. Up here on the surface, we have exponentially increasing entropy, where due to the lack of energy in this world that's being siphoned and sucked down into the underworld, um, we have lifespans that are decreasing, where people live and this is accepted by so many people. Yeah, well, I'm gonna do what I want with my 60 years or my 70 years, or that's not the way it used to be. That this is the season of Satan, where people don't have long lifespans, where there's sicknesses the world across, and it's just become normal. And it's mandated that you have to have health care and all this stuff. People's morals are on the decline. And there's all of these devices that people create, like a medium, to try to gain their magic abilities back, which we call technology. So technology is created to fill the gap where natural energy was once used by us and through us, and we shared that with one another. So since we don't have those times of magic anymore, we have to create all these devices to try to force electrical fields. And this electrical fields that we use is a negative charge that's left over up here on the surface, like this void of energy. And so it tends to resonate with that. And that negative energy that's left on the surface, while all this other energy, this positive energy, recedes into the earth, leaves us with evil. It leaves us with degradation. It leaves us with a lack of energy. This is why we sleep for over a third of the day sometimes. I know lately, a lot of people like myself can't sleep, and that has more to do with fluctuations that we go into before the apocalypse actually comes. It messes with the energetic fields, and there's all these fluctuations all over the place. So we're seeing that replicated and reciprocated in humans and in ourselves and in the animal world. And there's all these anomalies that are happening right now, which are the omens of what's to come.
Yeah.
But this is why people eat so much. This is why we're consumers. In the old world, whenever you're energetically charged, you're not hungry. You don't need to eat a whole bunch or consume things or whatever. You're just satisfied, because that's the reason we eat, is to get energy. When you're already energetic and your soul is charged to the point where you're strong and you're vigorous and you're, peaceful and happy and intelligent and whatnot, there's no need to go around stuffing things into your face and letting them go down in your stomach and all of that. That's just to get energy. Sleeping is to allow your body to recharge. You don't need to recharge when you're constantly charged.
Right.
The tales of old in the time of ancient oblivion about like the elven race and whatnot was that those beings, they just meditated when they needed a break. They didn't sleep. They didn't rest or go to bed for 8 hours. That would be crazy. That would be insane to them to do that. They would think there's something wrong with somebody, like they're in a coma or something. They would just meditate, take a break, and they were good. But that's the season of Satan. It's a time of degradation. It's also the season of Satan right before, leading up to, because this whole time everything's been sucked down into the heart of the earth, but it's more and more and more. So as time goes forward, it gets worse and worse and worse. Just before we go through a polarity flip, we have all these different fluctuations in energy, right? All over the place. And these fluctuations in energy across the world correlate to all of the changes that are quickly happening in the world, especially in regards to humanity. Humanity is spazzing out. I don't know how to describe it. There's nothing solid anymore. There's nothing dependable with humanity except for evil, except for corruption and degradation and immorality and just it's everything that was once considered bad is now seen as being normal or good or acceptable.
Well, let's talk about some of the possibilities that we may be interacting with and not even realize it. You have some interesting concepts in your talking points here, like zombies, sentient machines, plasma possessed. Talk a little bit about some of those concepts.
Okay. So zombies, sentient machines and the plasma possessed, they're all created by essentially the same thing. This goes back to the energetic vibrations and frequencies and fields that exist within this world, and how they relate to our own. So, for example, before I made the case that if we have an electrically amplified atmosphere, it would electrically amplify our very souls, our beings and chakras and whatnot. Now, if a person is an evil person, if they're bad, they have all these skeletons in their closet and they're a liar and they have a signature that resonates more with evil than it does good, then they can be overcome. They can be overwhelmed. They can develop a zealous fervor that they have tunnel vision, where their deepest, darkest, real desire, they get right to the point real quick, and they become what I call plasma possessed. And this happens whenever the the fields amplify around people, and it irritates them. Just like a good example is locusts, or grasshoppers, right? If you have a whole bunch of grasshoppers, they're just grasshoppers, whatever, nobody cares. But whenever they start buzzing and stuff, these vibrations, the more there are of them, they start vibrating with one another, and all these vibrations bounce off of, and then they become agitated and they become irritable, and then they go back to a base nature or an animalistic instinct to devour and consume and kill, or sometimes I guess they would kill, I don't know. But anyways, they become dangerous. Humans are the exact same way. Many things follow suit with this. So the humans, they become amplified, they become dangerous, they become more base in their instincts and animalistic in nature. This is what I call plasma possession, is whenever you have somebody that already resonates at a base level, or a lower energy signature, or they're evil, just simply put, they're just bad people. Okay, I'm not, no judgment, I'm just saying, like, we know bad from good, okay? And there's bad people. So when these bad people become amplified to that degree, they become like locusts. They start rioting, they start looting, they start pillaging, they start doing all of the very worst things because they're very self-centered. And then they'll actually come together and do these things to support one another, so that, they really amplify their cause and whatnot. We see a lot of this that's happening throughout the world, especially in the Americas right now during this time. I don't talk about politics and stuff like that a lot, but that's all happening in all these little political modes of thought the world across, but especially in the United States. And it's going to happen and get worse and worse and worse, if I'm correct, until the point where you have nearly everyone in the world seems to feel like, it seems to look like how the movies portray it, which is that there's a signal, there's a frequency that everyone is picking up on, and it amplifies their nature. And it amplifies it to such a degree that they become murderous. And their vision of that is that it's justified. Their vision of that is that it makes sense, and they're doing something that's good, when in reality they're just evil, completely amplified and overtaken. But the good news is the opposite of that.
So I was
is
just about
true.
to say, the other side is being amplified as well, right?
Yes. But the other side is the remnant of that old energy from the time of the golden age. That's a remnant. That's people who are born in those small pockets and vortices in the world where that good energy still exists and is still built up. But there's very few of those in comparison. So then we have a rise in enlightenment, and we have an awakening, and these positive movements that are sort of like almost kind of like 1970s hippie culture. I'm just as an example, I don't know, there's different forms of it. But then with the danger with that is that those evil people will see that, and there are mockers and there are copycats and stuff. So then you have the rise of gurus and false Christs and false redeemers and messiahs and leaders and all this other stuff. So there's this crazy mix, and this is all the fluctuation and turbulence energetically that happens historically right before an apocalyptic event.
You mentioned that we're going to have this essential reversal, whether it is a magnetic reversal, a pole flip, I'm not sure, but what we are seeing as a physical representation of this is our magnetic North Pole seems to be rapidly moving faster and faster towards Siberia, and this is something that academics noticed a few years, maybe even over a decade ago, but it continues to move. Could this be a representation on a physical level of what's occurring?
Yeah, I think so. I talk about the omens all the
Mm.
time. And for me, there's just millions and millions. Some omens are real big, worldwide, eye opening. Like, how can anyone not see that this is happening? The, the magnetic North Pole moving so quickly and at such an extreme speed and deviation from its old place where it was is definitely an omen that the electromagnetic polarity of our world is moving and it's flipping. This is a fluctuation that we're going into, and it corresponds with in academics. There's many articles that have come out in the last couple of years that talk about and speculate that the core of the Earth, according to the mainstream academics, has stopped spinning, or that has actually started spinning in the opposite direction. So the core is responding to this too, or
Mm.
the inside of the Earth, the energy that's inside of the Earth is also starting to reverse and to change directions. And whenever this happens, so it's related to how the firmament breaks open. It's related to how this cosmic plasma is allowed to come in and these thunderbolts are allowed to enter into this world. When we go through this neutral point, right? And it's also affecting the animal world. Like you'll see, there's so many things that this affects. It affects people, the animals. A lot of ocean life is being beached, and a lot of animals are in the wrong places. They're in places that they never really would have been before, not in their natural environments. They're migrating to weird places that they never really called home before, like flamingos. I don't know if you heard about those flamingos, up in the Midwest of the United
Mm.
States. It's so weird. Plus, that was featured on the movie Leave the World Behind
Oh,
too,
right,
like the
right,
whole
right. Yeah.
flamingo thing. So anyway, when we hit a neutral point, like I said, the magnetism disappears, which is the invisible protective barrier that forces out the cosmic plasma. All of the gases that are contained within the atmosphere rise up to the apex, and they essentially punch out a hole in the glass or the ice that's above us, and punches out a hole in the actual firmament. The Earth is going to grow and it's going to shake at that time, so there'll be worldwide earthquakes and stuff. But all this pressure rises up, bursts through the firmament. There's a hole in the firmament. All of this electricity comes into our world and fills the world for 3 days and 3 nights, just fills it with cosmic electricity from above. And this is before all of that good energy comes up from below, from the terrestrial beams that shoot up from the ground, and especially that comes from Mount Meru, which is like the main source and the biggest light source and the biggest terrestrial sky beam that people will see. But when all of this electricity comes down from above, that electricity up there comes in, and its purpose is to destroy, to cleanse out the world, to reshape the world. It's seen as the destroyer. It's seen as Satan or Santa, or all these different ways that it's depicted. But it comes down into this world to possess things, to change the world. And it plasma possesses these humans, like I talked about, giving them a different inclination, to serve evil, to actually be evil, or go around killing people and stuff. But it also will possess animals, the animal kingdom. They will become much more vicious, and the animals will retake the world as they go out of control. Uh, Animals will attack the world across all over the place. And it also, sorry, I'm just trying to collect my thoughts because this touches so many things. But when a person's aura is amplified, when a person's spirit, electromagnetic energy is amplified, then it's very possible they're able to see with a different type of sight, that they can recognize the different auras or lights that exist around them in the form of life forms, and they can see people are lit up as targets, either for
Mm.
good or for bad, depending on the polarity and where they fall in there. Um, but this plasma that comes in, it brings things to life. It goes into objects, and it's especially attracted to those things that are vessels or empty vessels, where it can become alive. It can experience the physical world and be physical. So it goes into electronics and machines and things that need electricity in order to spark its life force, basically, just like the Transformers and stuff. Like, that's all symbolic. So this happened during the Carrington event 100 years ago, give or take, where we had auroras or glories, which is really glowing of the sky, the world across, and all the, for a short time, the atmosphere they got a taste of it, just a small taste of the atmosphere being electrically charged. And back then, there wasn't as much technology and machines and stuff as we have today. But one of the stories that they have is there was people that used
Yeah,
telegraphs,
telegraph
and
lines
they were
exploding
using,
and shit.
yeah, they were exploding, but they were also working on their
Mm.
own. They unplugged them and they continued to function. It's like they
Wow.
were alive. And then they were sentient, doing things on their own that they weren't told to do. And then they were attacking people, or you could see it as attacking people when they were electrocuting, sending off sparks. There were
Wow.
operators that were being electrocuted and stuff.
That's
So you
crazy.
could see this as just a small version whenever the plasma apocalypse arrives and all of the atmosphere is electrically charged, and it brings to life, all these robots. Oh my God, the robots is another thing because they're building all these robots
Yeah.
right now. It's going to bring the robots to life. It's going to bring and everything that comes to life through this cosmic plasma will have a hive mindset. It'll have the
What?
same prerogative, which is why the plasma comes here in the first place. But the good news is once the firmament fixes itself and it reconstitutes itself and it heals, then that plasma, all the plasma inside will be cut off from its source. It'll be cut off from its main agendas and prerogatives or programs or whatever you want to call it, and it will essentially have choice now. It'll have free will. It'll be inclined to do evil and like it was, came here to do, but it doesn't have to. So it branches out in that direction. But then I want to touch on the zombie thing as
Yeah.
well. For this exact same reason, this is why the dead come to life, because all of this energy is life. Whether people see it as good or bad, for them or against them, it matters not. It's life. It brings things to life. This is spirit coming into the world, for lack of better words. And this is the reason why, like, remember I said that there's energy that comes down from above, but then there is this good, life-giving earth energy that promotes cellular regeneration. And I believe the ancients knew this. And so, expecting that the dead could be resurrected and that there would be a time when the dead could come back to life, they would find these places of power. And places of power are places where that inner earth energy escapes, from tunnels and caves and stuff. They would go down in there and they would build catacombs. They would put their dead lovingly, in a place, in a position, in bodily form with their skeletons and all that, in these catacombs and cavernous systems, for the day when that plasma returns up from inside the earth, and it fills those cavernous systems with cold plasmas that won't harm, and they will actually regenerate and activate all of the RNA, the DNA, and all the little building blocks, that exist within the bones. The bones are sort of like batteries to the body, and the bones have the ability, once they're activated and they're brought back to life, to start growing sinew and flesh and muscle and tissue and all of these things, and the body can be recreated and actually come back to life. Now, does it have the same spirit as the person that died? That's a totally different, philosophical question and avenue. But regardless, these bodies, they come back to life. They would be in different levels of decay. You know what I mean? Like, so obviously it'll take longer for just a pile of bones to come back to life and to grow a body and stuff than it would somebody that died yesterday and they're invigorated, right? They would probably just pop their eyes right open and maybe even be able to talk and stuff. So different types of zombies, and that's really what this is. They're zombies. They're the dead coming back to life. Now, there's two things that can do this. Two things that can activate the body to come back to life. One is the energy from below, the earth-giving energy, which tends to create saints and holy people and good people and stuff that rise up out of the ground, and it's collectively good-natured, individuals, because they're charged with good energy. But then you have the heavenly plasma or the cosmic plasma that comes down from above, that's negatively charged, and it imparts a negative attribute to those that it brings brings up from the dead. So you have the more traditional zombies that rise up or awaken or whatever, and they're trying to kill people and eat people and all that stuff. So you have these two different types of dead that are resurrected from the two different energetic sources.
Man, that is some of the craziest concepts I've heard for an apocalypse. We'd have zombies and robots that could be sentient. That'd be a hell of a ride, man. What you were saying earlier about what we could expect as far as changes in our reality and changes in our perception, people, and the different polarities that we're going to experience, people awakening and then people becoming, as you said, plasma possessed. This is all going to coincide with the progression of this reversal, right?
Yes. So it's all very cyclical in nature. Just from my perspective, looking at the world as it is, we can look at history and across time and sort of chart out the ups and the downs, the ebb and the flow to the energy of the earth. And if I'm correct that the earth is going into an extreme fluctuation right now, the most extreme fluctuation, you could see these fluctuations as being like birth pangs from a woman who's pregnant, and she's getting closer and closer to labor. And the closer she gets, the more intense, she's going to have these fluctuations, these birth pains and things like that, which is actually how it's described in the Bible and other places too, is a woman giving birth, which is also why people can't predict when it's going to happen. It's the same as telling me, what day and time, an hour a woman's going to give birth to her child. But we can look at the world around us, and I look at the world around us. I even take into consideration myself, and I do a self-diagnostic and examine myself on the grand scheme of my life and how I was and my own little fluctuations that I went through in life's events and stuff. But humanity is going through these fluctuations right now, which throws us into chaos and turmoil and creates these new norms. You hear that a lot on the news lately. That's a huge red flag, that the omen is like upon us, that, oh, it's the new normal. No. Those are anomalies that have become normal because it's in such a strong degree of fluctuation that it's happening all the time, which means that the woman is about to give birth. All of her pain is getting closer and closer. Her contractions are closer and closer. The earth is feminine in nature. It's been described that way. It's going to give birth. It gives birth to light. This is Mother Mary giving birth to the light of the world, Jesus. And the closer we get to that, the energy in this world, because there's so much pressure, okay, so let me go back a step. Before we get to the Mother Earth giving birth and the apocalypse and stuff like that, we have all these different signs. One of the things that's happening is deep within the earth. Pardon me. During the last cycle we went through, the Golden Age cycle, those terrestrial beams of plasma, that energy, it went through the cracks and the crevices, and that energy was absorbed by metals, different types of metals that are able to absorb electromagnetic energy, and crystals that also absorbed that same power for an entire age. Let's say 1,000 years. I don't know how long it lasted for, but just a very long time, an epic, an eon, an age. And these metals and these crystals are absorbing all this energy. So when that energy retracts, we're left with residual energy in the form of these little containers that have stored the energy in these special metals and these special crystals and stuff. And they lit up. They were basically radioactive, but they were radioactively charged. Over time, when they start losing that charge, and when they start losing their power, and these were precious stones that shined and gave off their own lights, that were sought after by the quote unquote gods and fallen angels and whatnot of old, because these allowed them to continue their lifespans. They used them medically to for healing, for cellular regeneration and stuff, because they still contained an element of that blue beam source that I talk about, terrestrial plasma, right? So they looked for these shining rocks. Now, once those metals, really, it's not rock, But once those metals and those crystals started to lose their energy, they would give off this energy. That's what we call radioactive decay. So these radioactive elements start decaying. They start releasing all of these electrons and stuff. And that's whenever they start causing heat and they generate all this heat. So you have to imagine all of those minerals down inside of the earth and crystals and stuff that absorbed all that energy. They're all getting hotter and putting out all this heat, which is causing all of these gases and whatnot to be created deep inside of the earth. Oh, by the way, just as a side note, they these gods, I mentioned these gods like looked for these minerals so that they could extend their lives. When those beings of the past left this world or disappeared or whatever happened to them, humans continued on in their footsteps, but they looked for the metals that were shiny, which became reflective in nature, which became gold and silver and stuff. Not the real valuable metals that extended life, which was the more valuable, like who cares about silver or whatever, unless you're making a sword. Anyway, so these gases are created. All this heat is generated. Pressure starts to build up inside of the earth. All these pockets of gas are starting to be released all around the world. In places where the world is weaker, or the surface is weaker, or it's composed of like calcium and gypsum and elements that just sort of become porous, over time with every time it rains and there's water and stuff. So that pressure will build up and it will allow for those things to break apart, which causes huge sinkholes. And so we'll start to see a rise in like gigantic sinkholes all over the place. They'll just happen all over. And the sinkholes are due to the pressure that's building up inside of the earth and the gases that are being built up inside of the earth. The earth is releasing all of these gases, just like a woman does before she gives birth. So the earth is releasing all these gases. Many of those gases are flammable. So if you have a huge abundant release of gas in some Siberian part of the Russian forest somewhere, and then it somehow ignites and combusts, then you have huge fireballs that people will start to see and experience. These are other omens. And I also think that's what happened in Tunguska too. Those gases also can ionize. When they build up enough speed shooting out from the pressure inside of the earth, that static electricity causes them to activate, and those gases ionize. They turn into plasma. They don't necessarily have to combust. It depends on the type of gas and its interactions, around it or whatever, but it can explode or it can ionize. It can become a plasma, basically. So you'll see a rise in lights in the sky and balls and orbs and strange streaks moving about, and people will think it's UFOs, and the UFOs are all coming and there's an invasion on the way, which has truth to it, like I mentioned before, because this is when Fantazoids come into our world. But the lights oftentimes are just that. They're lights that are created from the world. It's electricity. It's self-contained plasmoids that can move about and turn at 90-degree angles and really sharp directions and stuff. And they can do so many other things as well.
Now,
I forgot.
It's all right. It's all right. I want to ask you, I know that we cannot really speculate on a time frame for these events, but when we look at the overall cycles, have you any idea of how long this entire cycle may be? Thousands of years, 100,000? What do you think?
I don't know. Honestly, I'm just gonna be blunt. I feel like it's soon. That's as on the spot and specific as I can say. Like if it was a woman giving birth, she would look like a huge belly, leaning back, waddling where she goes, holding onto her back, like, you have to be real gentle with her. She's really fragile. That's the world now. 9 months. It could come in at any time. As now I can be more specific as to the times of the year that I feel these events happen. I do have what I feel is a good grasp on the actual time of year, not which year, but the time of year that people can expect. This brings us to holy days and holidays and ancient observances where people knew. At one point in time, there were survivors. Those survivors obviously were aware of the apocalypse, unless, of course, they developed amnesia, which also happens on a worldwide scale because it's such a traumatic event. Also, people, if you're zapped with electricity and stuff, it can mess with your memories in your brain and stuff. So there is the possibility for worldwide amnesia, and people can actually forget the
Yeah.
apocalypse. But those who retain their memories, those who know and went through it, stands to reason that they would remember, just like people talk about 9/11, like where were you? What were you doing? And a lot of people remember exactly where they were. They can recount it. Survivors of the plasma apocalypse recount it. They share this story over and over from generation to generation, passing on what eventually would become a secret because it would be forgotten about by, you have a new generation, another one. Hundreds of generations go by, and pretty soon this is a myth. Pretty soon this is just a story. This is something that allegedly happened, if anyone even talks about it anymore. But thankfully, when it was first spoken of, they knew the times of year that this happened, which corresponded to our solstices, the winter solstice and the summer solstice. And we have all of these holy days and holidays where in ancient times, it wasn't about some hallmark holiday based on consumerism and trying to get people to buy stuff, or some fake version of loving people or celebrating anything. It was a revered, respected, fearful time when people gathered together, called their families. They made trips to come together to be in one place, the safest place where they could be. They had food stored up. They would have these feasts on these times. They would make sure to have light and a source of light, a strong source of light that wouldn't just easily blow out from wind, that could stay lit for 7 days or more, 7 to 12 days. They would have bonfires. They would have Yule logs. They would have huge fires or chimneys that they had to continuously, add to it to keep the fire going so that the spirits couldn't come in, because this is a time, and this is why they have so many ghost references in Christmas, during Christmas time, because this is when one of these apocalyptic cycles happens, is around Christmas, or after, actually, just after Christmas. So you have the solstices basically, and that's when I believe that these happen. So the next one, based on my research so far, as of right now, I have a strong feeling that the oceans will be removed. The last time they were introduced, I believe, was the winter solstice. That was the birth of Jesus and all that stuff. That's the last time we had the light in the world. The next time will be the opposite. It'll be the summer solstice. It's not on the solstice, though. I want to just be clear about that. The solstice is the time when people gather together to watch, to see where the luminaries are. If the luminaries were out of place the day after the solstice, and they were not going back in the other direction like they're supposed to, because the sun, or the focal point up there in the sky, it goes north and south over the course of a year. It goes up and it goes back down towards the south, right? If that sun in the winter solstice kept going south and didn't return, they knew that the sun would disappear. They didn't have some stupid caveman belief because they were dumb and they didn't understand science or anything. Like, they built megalithic structures. They dedicated time and they built their buildings and stuff, then lined them up astrologically. They took years and years to make sure that they could study the sun, its position, the solstice, where it would be, and line it up, and just simply be able to look through holes in rocks and say, yep, it's in the right place, or nope, it's not. Everyone pack up, get ready, go hide, get ready for what's coming. And then it would take some time between that point on the solstice or the day after the solstice, so they could see if it's in the right spot or not. About 2 weeks later, so it takes about 2 weeks for these things to occur from the solstice. Now, 2 weeks after the winter solstice, approximately, we have New Year's Day, where everyone lights fireworks and the sky explodes and there's all these colors and streaks of light in the sky, and people are celebrating. That's the new year. That's the beginning of time as a marker for us. That's where we start our time over. Same thing on the summer solstice. We have the 4th of July here in the United States. They have other celebrations like summer solstices, across the world, and they have their own versions. But here in the United States, it's Independence Day, which is the day that the slaves are set free from the system that we're enslaved to, that the world that we live in. It's the year of Jubilee. It's the time whenever the world is reset and everybody is truly free. So people would watch, and either they would prepare for the apocalypse to come, in which case they would be reverent, respectful, quiet, fearful, and they took it very seriously. It was not, any kind of crazy holiday like it is today. Or they knew they did not expect it to come, and they were preparing to celebrate. They were preparing, to, I mean, they would be like, thank goodness, like we have another year to prepare and live our lives out or whatever. And I'll see you guys next year. Okay. Same time next year. Enjoy this year because you should be good for the rest of the year.
Right on. Now, this is fascinating. We're definitely have to get deeper into some of these concepts. And we got about 10 minutes left. I'd love to hear about some of your work with music symbolism and decoding some of what we're hearing in modern music. You've done some great work with films, and you were telling me earlier how you're moving into music. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing with that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you. So right now I've got a segment on YouTube called Truth in Movies, and I feel the truths that are being shared with me. I study esoteric and arcane symbolism, and the deeper meanings of these things beyond just ritual or pleasantries or whatever. But I relate them to actual physical occurrences or objects or times and stuff like we've been talking about. So I break down the movies and I'll share the real message, the really deep message, that is, the secrets of the world, so to speak, type stuff that are being shared with us through the movies. Also, I'm also starting a new one with the music videos, album covers. These songs that musicians are singing, they're enigmatic to a degree where they're riddles. They're just people you ask people what the song's about and they'll start talking in circles until they feel like they've internalized it so much that it's just some personal song just for them or something, or some experience that they had, or some generalized experience that everyone has. But some songs and I mean many songs and many lyrics are just so enigmatic to such a degree that they're sharing much more than, oh, I'm sad because my girlfriend broke up with me and left me or whatever. Many of these songs and the symbolism that's shared in the movies is about, I see it, my perspective is that it's about these secrets. This is the greatest secret of all in our world. Whether it's been purposely forgotten or it's being withheld from us or whatever, it falls to each person in order to go get the truth for themselves, right? Not to just be handed the truth on a silver platter that doesn't require any work or anything, but to go claim it, to go get it, to go seek it out, to look for the answers and to study for ourselves. So these secrets are being shared as little clues, as little subtle reminders and suggestions, either because these organizations and people and actors and singers, either they have to or they want to. There's some sort of disclosure basically that's happening.
Have you ever thought about that it's possible that
industry.
it's neither of those, but this unseen force that speaks through our imagination or creativity that comes through
Yes.
to guide us along our way, maybe?
Yes, I love that. Okay, so that's actually what I lean more towards, is that instead of blaming humanity and saying, well, it's them and we're doing this or they're doing that or they're keeping it or they're doing this, it's nature. And all of what is happening in our world, it reverberates within our world and stays within our world, and it resonates everywhere at a subconscious level at most of the time. At least during this time that we live in right now, it's very subconscious. I feel like it'll be more conscious during the time to come, but we can tap into and tune into these things subconsciously, individually or collectively, which has been referred to as like the Akashic records, from the Sleeping Prophet, and the halls of Amenti. There's different descriptions of this, but the earth records it all because it doesn't go away. It doesn't go anywhere. It just continues bouncing off of things and moving about, and all of that information is still here. So I like what you're saying, that we tune into this, especially those who are creative minded. In a world where we use our left brain and we're taught to be more reptilian in thought and computer minded and robotic in thought, and the ends justify the means and numbers and math and all that stuff, we've really had our right side of our brain and our creativity locked away and made unlawful to use, except for in certain circumstances, the line with certain agendas or whatever. But a lot of these songs, they will talk about people floating up into the sky. They'll talk about alien creatures entering into this world. They'll talk about these celestial fires. They'll one of the main things they talk about is paradise and a return to paradise, and this physical, actual, safe haven on Earth that was known as the Garden of Eden and Hyperborea, and how they came from there, or their ancestors came from there, or they'll talk about, many of them. It seems like it's a lineage deal, right? So it could be some of that too. They'll talk about these stories and they'll tell them over and over again about beings that dropped down from the sky, humanoids that met on this holy mountain, that landed on this huge, tall mountain, which I believe is Rupus Nigra on the medieval maps of the Arctic. There's land there. There's a circular landform. And I believe that, that's my new book, is all about how that land is the land beyond the northern wind, or Hyperborea. It's also the Garden of Eden because it meets all the requirements of the four rivers and other things as well that are listed. So these songs, they echo these ancient truths about our place of origin, about the life in other worlds, about apocalyptic cycles, especially. So sometimes you might hear a love song or something. On the surface level, people would just say, oh, it must be about some girl. It must be about some relationship or something. But on a deep level, it's about this person being in mourning, sad that they lost this light, this life-giving light, this relationship they had, because those beams of energy, or the main beam of energy, retracted and went back down into the earth. This is a time of mourning that's shared through music and other things as well. And they'll talk about the apocalypse on the way. So for example, like REM has a song, and it's called Losing My Religion. And he talks about being in a spotlight and losing his religion or his religious beliefs or whatever. And a part of that song, he says, consider this. He's like, consider this, the tell, like, a tell in poker where like you give away a secret or whatever, like you give away your hand. So the tell of a century. And then he says, consider this. And he's talking to the audience. He's telling you, I want you to think about this. And then he says, what if all these fantasies come flailing around? He says, this is the tip that brought me to my knees. When he heard this, whoever told him this, or whenever he realized this, it changed his entire view of everything. He stopped being religious. He lost his religion, and he had a different view on things. What if all these things that we consider to be fantasy and fiction and sci-fi and made up and basically lies, according to academics, what if they're real? What if there's truth to all of these things? Truth in the music, truth in the movies and all of these entertainment industries. What if we're tapping into something that's cyclical, that we're remembering something that happened in our ancient oblivion that will eventually come back to visit us?
I love it, man. This is such fantastic information. Jay, thank you so much. Definitely going to have you back on in the future. Much more we can get into. Before we close out, let the audience know how they can find you.
Okay. Well, I'm Jay DreamerZ. I have a YouTube channel by the same name, J A Y, the word dreamer, and then the letter Z at the end. I got different playlists about different topics, all on my YouTube channel. I've also have a website where I've been adding to that for probably the past 7 years. It's jdreamers.com. On my website, there's lots of good audio and visual examples of all these different topics that I've sort of just quickly touched on and stuff. There's a free 24-hour trial. So if you're a member, you have access to the whole website. There's a 24-hour like cram session that you can do for free if you want to, just to sort of try it out and see how you like it. That's jdreamers.com. And then I have my 2 books that I've written in my Ancient Oblivion series. There's right now those are available on Amazon. Soon I will be selling them personally for a lower price and with autographs and stuff like that and merch or whatever. But they're called Ancient Oblivion, The Plasma Apocalypse, and Ancient Oblivion, Return to Hyperborea. So you can find those on Amazon right now, or check out my community section in the future where I'll be, mailing those out personally.
Perfect. Jay, thank you so much. I'll have the links for everyone in the description. And until next time, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. See y'all then.